Ready to go? Great. Hi everyone. Thank you for coming to the next session of Span 21, which is about sport and football journalism. We're joined by Renuka Adreda, who is a freelance journalist and a football commentator, to tell us a bit about her career and any advice that she has for people looking to get into sports journalism. We're recording this session, but we're not live streaming it. So if people want to ask Renuka any questions, you can do so by putting your hand up on the reactions, and we'll unmute you and you can ask your question, or you can ask the question in the chat. I'm sure Renuka's happy to answer anything you might have. So Renuka, thank you for joining us.
Happy to.
Would you like to start off by telling us a bit about your background in journalism and how you got into sort of freelancing and commentating on football?
So kind of my journalism journey really started when I was actually doing a digital media degree at Manchester Met University, and I dropped out because I didn't really like it. And so when I did, I was trying to find what I like to do, and I love sport, I love football, and I loved writing, I loved broadcasting, all that sort of stuff. So I kind of mashed the two, and I thought sports journalism was it for me. And I saw an advert for a BBC kickoff traineeship scheme, which was basically you go down to your local radio station and you do 8 weeks, I think it was there, so 2 months. And you kind of just literally dig in, go into the newsroom, you find stories, you record radio packages, you do interviews, etc. And I thought this is perfect for me. And I did get it. I got it at BBC Radio Derby. I'm from Leicester, so it wasn't that far away from me. So I went there for 2 months. I think it was like 3 or 4 times a week. And it was amazing. It was the year of the Olympics. It was in 2016, and everybody was so busy with Adam Peaty. He was kind of Derbyshire's finest in the Olympics. And so like, go out and find your own stories. And the first piece I did was when Sam Allardyce became the New England manager. Not for long, spoiler alert. But I did vox pops. I was just out on the streets of Derbyshire asking people what they thought about him becoming manager. That kind of was my first piece on the hair. And it was just so nice to see something you'd recorded, edited, go out on air, and it was just really nice. So that was kind of my first kind of big experience in kind of journalism, sports journalism, and that kind of really just gave me a taste of things. And I thought, I definitely want to do this. And so then I went and started uni at my local uni at Democracy University, and shout out to Demon Media. And so I've got a lot of practical experience there, but I also volunteered for my local hospital radio station. And so they didn't really have a dedicated sports show or anything like that. So I came in and kind of did that. And so one day they asked me, they were a presenter short at the King Power Stadium. I think we're really fortunate as a hospital radio station to go out there and do some reports and commentary and stuff like that, because there aren't many hospital radio stations out there. And so, they were like, do you want to go out there and, do like a commentary or updates, anything like that? And I was like, you'd have to ask me twice. I'll do that. And I can remember it was when Leicester won the Champions League. They were flying high. They just won the Premiership. So, I was like, definitely want to be there. And really, since then, I've been there. I've done like 3-4 seasons now, and it's just been amazing. And so whilst I was at uni, I did come loads of work experience and stuff like that, and that's how I got started in journalism. Your second question, I think it was freelancing. So I graduated in 2019, and the world went all hell loose in 2020. So it kind of was like I was trying to find a full-time job, people losing their jobs. And so it was kind of like, how do we bring a newcomer in? So my only kind of option was to freelance, to kind of find work for myself. And I didn't really kind of know what it took to be a freelancer. And it really is dog eat dog. It's difficult, especially in sports journalism, because I don't think a lot of people talk about freelancing in sports journalism, because it is kind of a different world in itself. Because I can remember when I was at uni, I used to pitch pieces to all the nationals, and they just don't have freelancing budget for freelancers. It just does not exist, because you have your Miguel Delaney's and Jonathan Lew's, they already do a fine job. So it's kind of like, why do we need you? And so, it's an art in itself. I've learned a lot, and it really is, just kind of digging deep. And you kind of, as a freelancer, have to find your own unique perspective on what you can give to football and sport. So,
So going back to sort of what you said you've been commentating on Leicester for a few years now. I don't want to turn this into like a sports talk show, despite my inclinations. But that's been quite, there's been quite an up and down few years. Obviously, winning the league and then Champions League, and then a couple of years back to sort of up a mid-table title, and now obviously back on. Challenging for top four and perhaps failing to get top four. How's that been sort of as a up and down and following them through like quite a turbulent time, a couple of managerial changes? How have you found that, especially so early in your career?
I think it was just so exciting to go in on a high when they after they won the Premiership, because it was such an exciting time to just be from the city, just to be from Leicester. It was such an exciting time because this team, the underdogs, they kind of put Leicester on the map, and it was just amazing. So to kind of love sport and love football, it was such an exciting thing to be a part of. As the up and downs go, it was with, kind of Craig Shakespeare, then we had Claude Puel, and, now Brendan Rodgers, of course, everyone loves Claudio Ranieri. He was such a big character at the club. But the up and downs, I think after the Premiership, one thing was obvious, that Leicester wanted to be a top club, and there was kind of no way they were going to let go of this momentum. So to be part of that and know that they, were on the up and they wanted to stay there, more importantly, was really exciting. And you can't remember, even in the Champions League, they surprised people. I mean, playing against, Atletico Madrid in the semis, that was something. So, it's been exciting for sure. Of course, there's been dips, and I think that's with the team evolving as well. So, as a commentator, it's really nice because you're part of the story that's unfolding. And that's kind of the same as being a fan as well. You're kind of part of seeing the story unfold, and it's kind of like, it would kind of be normal if Leicester didn't do well, kind of, if that makes sense. But they haven't kind of lost their grip on this momentum, which has been amazing. And I think that's why the reaction to the Super League was so strong, because you're going to lose stories like this if you do have a Super League.
I think what would it be like a one-team City? I know that you're not a Leicester fan yourself, but that must be helpful in a way, because it's everyone's rooting for the same team. Does that make it easier to sort of that everyone who's going to be listening is also rooting for Leicester, and not say you were doing it in Manchester and half the city's blue, half the city's red. It's everyone supports Leicester. Is that does that affect sort of the way you commentate on games and so on?
Yeah, definitely, in a way, because you kind of with Leicester, it's so interesting because we're such a sporty city. I don't know, a lot of people know that. The Leicester Riders, the basketball team, just won the championship God knows how many times now. But so as far as football goes, is the general consensus is we have one football team. You kind of stick behind them. So that is interesting. I think you don't get to play, like you said, and mentioned Manchester, so you don't get to play with kind of the rivalry part of things as well. And it is a unique feel, because I remember going to the parade when they won the Premier League, and it was kind of people from all sorts of backgrounds, just anyone. I can takeaways were opening their shops and just offering food for free. It was weird, and it was like just a big massive party. So it is kind of, as a commentator, you kind of approach it as we stick together no matter what, the highs and lows. And it is kind of, if there is a low, you kind of just have to kind of see it through, because you're supporting the team, you're supporting the club, you're supporting the city. So that is a unique perspective, I guess.
Yeah. So I'd say you probably had quite an unusual route into it, through hospital radio, I think you said, and that's obviously, you said there isn't that many sort of hospital radio stations around anymore. But you should, student journalists, like the people who've joined us today, should they be sort of grasping at any opportunity like that, even if it seems perhaps small to begin with? It's obviously blossomed into something that's great experience for you. So should people be always looking for those opportunities, no matter sort of where they can find them?
That's such a good question. And honestly, I would say yes, 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 and yes. Because when you're a student, you kind of want to go for those big time kind of work placements and internships, etc., you want to go for the Times or a national newspaper, national broadcaster, and that's all well and good, but you kind of get lost in those places, because I've done the same. I've been to those places and I've done a work experience there, but it's easy to get lost because, first of all, there's so many people who work at those organizations and those companies, and there are already people there who do a good job. So when you kind of want to prove yourself in a way and build up experience, it is nice to go to those small places, because first of all, you get to know everyone, you kind of get to show them who you are, what you can do. And with me, I only knew of Arsenal radio stations because of the great Jackie Oatley. I can remember sending her an email and going, Jackie, I'd love to get into broadcasting, but I just don't know how I can do it on a consistent basis, really, before I went to uni. So, and she was like, have you heard of hospital radio stations? I didn't know they existed, to be honest. And so I found out there was one not that far away from me, literally 5 minutes away from me. And so I just sent them an email and was like, can I come in and be a part of this radio station? And so, yeah, it's so worth finding those local mediums. If you have like a local paper, or even like we have like a village paper, I don't even know, like they send it through like every month, I think it is. And it's just so nice, because if you can get in touch with that editor or the person who's the chairperson at that place or whatever, and just go, can I come in and just even shadow what you do, or kind of in a way, because then you get a feel of it. You don't have to do it if you don't kind of like that environment. But yeah, it is so worth doing those kind of things, because yeah, it's so much better in a way, because you can stick around for longer as well. I feel like when you do work experience at big places, it's a 1 week thing or like a couple of weeks at most. Whereas this, you can actually try it out and be a part of it for such a long time, and it's a unique experience. People won't have heard of many people who do hospital radio station work. So yeah, it's unique.
Yeah, I had a similar experience when I started off in sort of when I was young and trying to get into journalism. I emailed like a local non-league club run by a load of City fans. If you're watching at home, you can probably tell I support Man City. But they said come down and like have a chat to us. And I turned up in a City shirt and they just went, right, you in. So, and that was a great experience to like go along and get experience of writing match reports and interviewing players, even at such a low level. And that's an opportunity that I wouldn't have got if I'd not reached out. So I think it is,
right.
It's definitely worth encouraging people to just ask the question, isn't it?
You're right. And another thing I'd add to that is, like you said, it gives you access. It gives you access to kind of equipment, first of all. So a studio, radio equipment, etc. if you're at a radio station. And it gives you access to players, managers. It's like practice in a unique way without being rushed into kind of the big league gigs.
Yeah. And when moving on from Leicester, when you were at uni, I believe you were part of Demon Media, the Demon is obviously one of the SPA's member publications. Did your time sort of on student media give you some good opportunities to like start covering the university sport, but also wider sport that perhaps you might not have had the opportunity to, go into live sport around the city?
Definitely. So I think I was one of I think I was like the only woman. I think I was the only woman part of the sports team at the Demon for the first year. And I can remember going, I love football, please let me do something on it. But yeah, so I think definitely it definitely pushed me to go outside of my comfort zone, because I think everybody kind of just goes, I like football. But kind of covering the university sports, futsal, basketball, American football, all those kind of things, and you go, okay, I'm not really familiar with this, but just sit down, watch a game, see what it's about, and you can kind of go from there. So I was writing match reports, I was doing interviews, I was doing feature pieces, and also giving coverage to sports which get little coverage. So I love netball, and I love covering the women's netball side. That was interesting, just kind of getting to know them as players, kind of what their kind of routine was as kind of university students / players was interesting. So it was really nice, because you get to cover a lot of sports in a short amount of time, and and it was nice as well because you'd as the editor would go, can you cover this and that? And, I'd be like, yeah, whatever it is, yeah, okay, I'll do it, because it's nice. You'd have your lecture, and then in the afternoon, I'd go and just sit in a futsal game, and it was just nice to just see what that was about and talk to the players. And it's just nice to familiarize yourself with the routine as well of players, because I think a lot of people when you see it on screen, you see the football match on BT or Sky or whatever, and then you see the presenters interview them, but you've got to realize how the whole system works. And it's like a mini version of the big system, which is nice. But yeah, it's really nice to be a part of the Demon, and yeah, an experience I absolutely treasure.
Yeah. So you obviously mentioned that you often found yourself going and just in the afternoon coverage that you completely didn't expect. So what's the most left field sport that you've ever ended up doing some coverage of?
I think it was American football, because it was so alien to me in a way. I was like, I think I avoided it in a way, because I went, American sport. It's like, I'm trying from a fan. I just never ventured that way into American sports. I know a lot of people like American sports, hockey, things like that, but I never just ventured that way. So yeah, that was like, okay, this is weird, but I'm going to just stick with it.
The last year has been obviously, really challenging in a lot of aspects, as you'll know, but especially for student publications, and particularly sports sections where quite a lot of live sport's been cancelled, and where live sport has been on, it's been very tightly controlled. A lot of people not let in, and that's made it really hard for student journalists, especially at my student paper when I was at uni. We're always going down to Sheffield Wednesday, Sheffield United to watch live games, which is something that's not really possible in the current climate. So obviously that's a challenge. So how can student journalists and student papers creatively cover sports on their campuses? Do you have any sort of thoughts or tips?
Oh, that's a hard one, isn't it? And I completely feel for, honestly, any student who is a student during this time. It absolutely sucks. I'm sure the experience just dwindles down to technology, doing stuff like this. You don't get with sport, it's amazing because you're in that room, you feel the mood. When you're a presenter or a commentator or anything, or any person part of the media, you get a lot of your words in, if you're doing a match report, etc., from the feeling, or from the action, just being in that room or being in that stadium. So it sucks not to be there live. But God, my tips would be, I think there's an opportunity to do a lot of the pandemic has taught us we're all human. The human side of sport, I think, is covered less. A lot of people just go straight to sport, which is nice. You love to see, a big match and see what it's all about in terms of the sport itself, but just the human aspect of it as well. Because I was interested in just how university students would just go about their routine. I know some of them have rigorous eating schedules, etc. It's just athletes with themselves. So human features would be nice if you could get to interview players and how they're feeling during this time. But in terms of covering sport, God, it is difficult, isn't it? I don't know how you could do it anywhere else. I think seeing the human side of it would be nice. How everyone's coping with this.
Yeah, I think a lot of the stories that I've seen sports sections doing, which have been really inspiring, are covering teams that are raising lots of money for charity and trying to do charity, especially during the first lockdown last year. When everyone still knew each other really well. But obviously sports opening up now, and that is making sports sections, but it means they have more to cover, and hopefully next year back to normal, loads of varsities around the country and everything else. As well as commentating, you're also a freelance journalist, not just on sport, but on other things like lifestyle. Do you have any ideas of outlets that people could pitch to when they're sort of starting out, especially as a student, to try and build their portfolio? Because obviously there's I don't think there's as much space for pitching sports stories as there is perhaps other areas like comment pieces or lifestyle.
Right.
So do you have any tips on where people could try pitching to try and build their portfolio as well as writing for their student publication?
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that was like me. I was kind of trying to pitch to national newspapers, and they just honestly do not have a budget and they don't have space for you. And that sounds really, really harsh, but it's just true, because they have the writers to already do the job you want to do. And in a way, it's really sad, because you almost question yourself as a young writer and go, well, wasn't that a good piece? It probably is a brilliant piece, but they just don't have the space for it. So I would say go for, there are so many football magazines, sport magazines, independent and crowdfunded. I'm sure everyone's heard of Mundial. I know they've switched. They don't do physical copies anymore, which is so sad, but they do have a blog. So you can pitch stuff like that. Pickles magazine. 442 is a good one. If your pitch is strong enough and the story is good enough. And I would say if you're pitching, pitch something that the staff in the office wouldn't pitch or wouldn't write about, because that's so easy to go, oh yeah, I'd love to interview X, Y, and Z at this. Oh, I've got a brilliant interview, but yeah, that's something they've already probably done. So you have a unique perspective. Everyone has a unique perspective on what they can write about. Use that and make an interesting piece. You know, have an interesting pitch. That's something they wouldn't have thought about, because you got to remember they have only a limited amount of staff, which can only write about so much. And so you have the freedom to really bring to them something different. And yeah, there are so many magazines. I mean, I can't even think of all of them from the top of my head, but there's so many. Glory Magazine is a good one. I think my first freelance pitch was to Glory Magazine, and it was only their first edition. And they have so many great editions out now, and they kind of do football in different places, so out of the mainstream. So they cover a different country each edition. So they've done like Sweden, the Faroe Islands, Norway. So I can remember I pitched them my first kind of story around the first Indian player to play in the Europa League and in a top European division. And that was something unique, because I thought it was a story that needed to be told. I thought this was huge for South Asian players, because you just don't see South Asian players in football. And so I kind of brought that story to them, and they were only just starting out. This is completely right up our street, because they're trying to tell stories that have not been told, or, you know, not the Messis, not the Ronaldos, etc. You know, something different. So it fit right into their blogs, and it got published. So yeah, be unique, be different, and that can be hard. That's really easy to say, but it is such a crowded market. So just try to if you find that kind of niche, just run with it, and then honestly run with the idea first, and then you will find someone who will want to publish it. I promise you. You just got to find it, because there's so many independent football magazines out there now. It's amazing.
Fantastic. I'm going to be quiet for a minute, because we've got a question from David, who's got his hand up. So David, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much for this talk. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate the time you guys have done to put this together. And I wanted to put a question out there, because you mentioned freelance and obviously, you know, making yourself stand out, because as someone who's I'm in my final year on a journalism degree, and I'm writing, well, yeah, you could say I'm writing on a voluntary basis for a sort of sports publication called Sport and Ferret. And I wanted to ask, what advice would you give to someone who is looking to get into the freelance sort of sports journalism business? And in terms of making yourself stand out, how do you make yourself stand out? You know, obviously you talk about being unique. How do you like make yourself stand out to the point where they find you appealing in a application process?
That's such a good question. What was the first question again? Sorry, the first question was about freelancing, right? Okay, so the first question was about freelancing. So yeah, freelancing. When I started freelancing, I did not have a clue how to kind of go about it in a way. So the first thing I did was kind of learn how to write a pitch, and learn how to write a pitch in a way that wasn't an essay, because it's just easy to kind of have an email get lost in an editor's inbox because they get millions of emails a day. So pitch, be concise, be unique, have a strong headline, lay it out in a way as if you would a business proposal in a way, kind of, okay, so this is my story. This is why it's important. These are the people I want to interview. And this is why it would fit into your publication. Find the right editor, because often you kind of see an editor who works at a certain place and they might not just be the right editor and just kind of go, this isn't for me. So find the right editor also. As well as freelancing, there are so many freelancers out there who will be willing to help. I can remember when I got into freelancing, I got in touch with an amazing freelancer called Amelia Tate, and I was like, Amelia, I need help. How do you do this? And you know, kind of, it is just honestly ask. I think my DMs are open, so if any of you have questions after that, please feel free to pop me a message. But just ask people questions. Don't feel shy to ask people who already do this to go, how on earth do I do this? Because it is easy to get lost as a freelancer, because the fact is there are so many freelancers out there. So yeah, as a freelancer, learn how to pitch. Money-wise, money's huge. I know Gem does an amazing newsletter on the rates, on journal resources, on what the rates are for particular publications. As a student, I know some publications are so cheeky, they just think you're young and that you won't fight for kind of what you should get paid. So obviously, if you feel like a rate's not good enough, maybe try and kind of work with the editor, or yeah, and I would say don't work for free. I know there's a big kind of question on this. If you especially in freelancing, because you try to get something out of it, you should be paid for your work. So yeah, if somebody goes, can you do this for free? Like, if I don't know, kind of, we've all done it. We've all done voluntary work. We've already done stuff for free. But I feel like once you graduate and kind of come out of university, you should be paid for your work. And so yeah, as standing out goes, oh God, I always say this, you all definitely do have like a unique perspective. So just find out within you what interests you. As me, I can remember I started just when women's football was taking off, and I can remember watching the Women's World Cup in Canada, and staying up to watch all those games, and it was amazing. And it was just on the come up, and I thought, okay, well, I could write about women's football because it was just coming up. So find those kind of trends in a way. What's new? What can you hop on that people don't have the time to cover? That's important. My perspective was also diversity. I don't want to be the diverse writer, but I was trying to find stories that needed to be told and should be told, but people just simply don't have the time to. And that's so sad to say, because people do want to read about the Agueros and the Ronaldos, etc., because that's what's trendy and that's what's going to bring the clicks. But there's also a space for different stories, and if you strongly feel like it should be told, then there's no reason why you can't write about it and can't get that published. Standing out, I would say, like, I know Ben brought this up, like, go for those smaller working experience opportunities, because honestly, they do count as much. Like, it's so nice to have, oh yeah, I've done something with the BBC and I've done something with the Times, or etc. But if you can go, I've done this with my local paper for 3 years and this is all that I've got published, like, you'd also notice that your skills have been refined. Like, because you just don't get the time at big organizations to be there long enough to learn something thoroughly. So definitely, and yeah, just be unique. Don't take the mainstream pathway, I'd say. And just prove it to themselves. I think if you've done the work, that will always shine. And someone said something really interesting to me in an interview was, it seems like every opportunity you've had, you've made it for yourself. Nothing has been handed to me, and I despise it when people say you're lucky, because I promise you, I'm not lucky. I just worked for those opportunities. I just applied for them, and I grafted for them. It meant commuting to London for God knows how many weeks, and getting on that 5 o'clock rush tube down to London and then back to Leicester. Just honestly work hard, and this industry is dog eat dog, and it is tough, and sometimes you go, damn, I don't want to do this anymore, but just stick with it. And if you do, honestly, once you build up the experience, you will know I'm good enough for this and I can do it. So that would be my advice.
Good. Thank you, David. That was a great question. We've had a question in the chat from Fikra, who asked, what are some things you might like to see changed, added, or removed in sports journalism that would make the field more friendly for new women and people of colour sports writers?
I always say this, like, people always put the emphasis on networking, and I completely believe there's a benefit in networking. But I think what sports journalism relies on in a negative way sometimes is who you know. Because when there's a new startup, such as The Athletic, when there's such a big shift in sports journalism and football journalism, people look to who they already know. And that can be such a negative thing for people like me, because I'm kind of screaming and going, I promise you I can do the job. But it's like, oh yeah, but we already know X, Y, and Z, who works for X, Y, and Z. And that can be quite negative. But I also say there's a benefit to networking, in the sense that a lot of my advice and kind of a lot of wisdom has come from women in the industry who I know. People like Jackie Oli, people like Anna Kessel, who I would not have I don't think I would have stuck with football journalism in the way I do now if I didn't kind of go, is this for me? Because the fact of the matter is, you don't see many people in sports journalism like me. That's a fact. And oh God, what else could be removed? I think that's a negative thing. It would be just nice, wouldn't it, if you sent in an application and somebody goes, you have a really good CV, you've done some amazing things, let's bring you in and see what you can do, even if it's for a week or two, and then, I don't know, you can have the opportunity. That would be so nice, but it doesn't work in that way. Another thing about sports journalism, and this goes to the wider media as well, is it's location centric. And so I talked about slogging it down to London and kind of doing work experience, etc. It is a barrier, because sometimes I think of the people who've kind of done the same things as me, and they've kind of got further than I have, purely because of where they're based. That's just the way it works, honestly, because they're in London and I'm not. So I think that's kind of a negative thing, and I know the media's trying to change that. But with sports, I feel like it is still very London, Salford centric, and I sort of feel like if you don't have access to those places, or if you don't have the financial ability to just kind of uproot and go to those places, it's very hard. I've had so many negative experiences as well as positive experiences as a woman of color in this industry. And I think just a lot of people it is mainly white men in the room, let's be honest. When I'm there in the newsrooms, radio stations, newspapers, social media desks, across the board, it is mainly white men. And so when you go there, I remember I had this one guy ask, "Oh, so you're not into cricket?" And I was like, "Are you serious?" But it is kind of just like, just don't be an expletive. Just don't be that person. Just be kind. Just I think if you're already in the industry, just honestly, the one thing that you could do for a person of color or someone who's different from you in the industry is just share what you already know, kind of pass down that wisdom, pass down those kind of advice and skills. Yeah, those are some of the things I would change.
Yeah, that sounds great. I just want to circle back a little bit. So you mentioned Mundial magazine earlier, who you said are sadly not doing print anymore. Obviously, I think they've been hit quite hard by the pandemic. But I think we are seeing more publications like that who aren't, football publications in the traditional vein, like right. Your World Sox and your 442s. Is that something that you've noticed as well? So sort of more publications along those lines, and what do you think that means for journalists and young journalists who perhaps have to then change their approach while trying to get into the industry to sort of adapt to that change?
I think it goes back to kind of what David asked, the question he asked. It's kind of like, because these publications, I think a lot of the move is towards culture, and you kind of get those magazines focused on football fashion. So there are different facets of kind of sports they pick out, kind of like football fashion. That's such a big thing. like especially with the kind of retro shirts, classic football shirts, it kind of became a big thing, and people go, hold on, people are actually interested in football fashion, let's talk about this. So I think people are starting to pick apart the sport, in the sense that it's not just about the sport, it's not just about the 11 players on the field and the result at the end of the day. There is a different part. There's the cultural side, there's the fashion side, there's the I know there's magazines dedicated to women in football, women's football specifically. So there are different facets of the sport that people pick apart and kind of make a magazine out of. And I think that's what David brought up. That's one of the routes you could take in being unique. If you have a passion for football fashion, for example, and you like fashion, you like football, that'd be a great avenue for you. Why not? I mean, you see all these football releases with big brands, you know, kind of sustainability in football now. There's so much you can talk about that's not about the sport. And that's such a good point, because it doesn't have to be live sport. If you're not into live sports, you're not into the commentary or the match report side of things, I promise you there's a place for you in this industry, in the media. Just find what you like, and find if there's somebody already doing that, and if you can be a part of that, because it doesn't have to be the mainstream kind of basic, just thinking about the sport. Obviously people love sport because, well, they love the sport, but there's different aspects of it that you can be a part of that's not just about football or tennis or Formula One or whatever. And I think it's a good thing. I think it's definitely a good thing that kind of is broadening out and giving different people the opportunity to be a part of something that's different and not part of the status quo.
Yeah, I think someone, one of the trustees messaged me earlier and said, one of the things she's noticed is definitely more of less of a focus on having to be the one doing match reports, and more of a focus on off-field matters. Obviously all the stuff with the Super League a couple of weeks ago, and boardroom discussions, but also a greater discussion of tactics and analysis that I think broadcast in some respects isn't able to capture. But in long form online journalism like The Athletic, although they may not be perfect, they do that quite well, sort of long form journalism, and that's a big change as well. I think that I think young journalists are quite good at, and you see in student publications, is more than just that those match reports and stuff like that. I think part of that is sort of integrating yourselves with the sports community. So obviously for you that would be the community in Leicester and Leicester City supporters. For student journalists, that'd be integrating themselves with the sort of sports teams on campus, as well as just regular students. How do you sort of build that bond so that you can build that connection, and you can understand the kinds of stories and angles that the people that you're commentating for in your case, or writing for in sort of student publications case, so you can capture the things that they want to read or hear about.
Mm-hmm. With Leicester, like, I'm from Leicester, so I kind of know the community, and I kind of know the city, and the big kind of thing that people notice about Leicester when they won the Premiership is such a diverse city, and that was widely reported on. This is a city with a large South Asian demographic, but there are people from all sorts of backgrounds in the city who support Leicester City, and that was an amazing thing to see. The owners are Thai, and if you've been to the stadium or go to the stadium, they kind of had a kind of Buddhist ceremony where they have kind of these Thai banners around across the whole stadium, which is just amazing. So there's one of the things that I picked up on is when Leicester won the Premiership, I realised this account followed me on Twitter called This Fangirl, and I'm sure a lot of you may have heard of This Fangirl. Now they do amazing work around kind of women's football and cultural aspects of football, and it was started, co-founded by this woman in Leicester. So I was like, hey, this is amazing. Like, just in the back of kind of Leicester winning the Premiership, I realized there were a lot of kind of small kind of media outlets starting up, kind of football groups starting up in Leicester, because there was just kind of this football boom. And so I she came down for a match. She lived in London at the time, and I said, when you're in Leicester, let's meet up, have a coffee, and we can talk about this. And I did an interview covering this fangirl, and it was amazing. And they were basically doing a photography project where they were capturing female football fans, because you kind of look at football fans and you don't see many female football fans depicted in a positive light. So she was doing that, and it was amazing. And I think it became part of a museum gallery at the National Football Museum later on. But it was amazing just to catch that early on, even before kind of they boomed as well. So just kind of be wary of kind of what's happening, the things in your city. If there's somebody from your city involved in a project, that's always nice. If you know someone from Manchester who's doing something, kind of a cool thing, then it would be great to get in touch with them and cover that story. But also community-wise, it was nice to just, as a South Asian woman, kind of echo how nice it was for Leicester to kind of be on the map, and also talk to the South Asian Leicester supporters, because it's kind of like with Man United. I know they used to be, in the Alex Ferguson era, they used to be a group of Sikh supporters. You saw them right at the front of the stadium, and that was kind of just nice as a South Asian football kind of fan to see. And it was like, we do belong in football, and just to kind of amplify those voices. So yeah, like every city has a unique community, has a unique story, and so if you kind of latch onto that, I know there's a lot of things around the LGBT community in football as well, and there's supporters groups. And around the Super League as well, a lot of supporters groups have had their kind of stories amplified as well. So it's nice to go down to kind of what makes sport what it is, which is the fans. So yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. Great, and we're sort of coming towards the end of the session. We've got another 5 minutes left before we have to go on to what we've got started at 4 o'clock. So if anyone else has any questions that they'd like to ask Vanuka, now's your chance to get in the chat or put your hand up. But I've got another couple, if no one has any. So you obviously only been in sort of sports journalism industry for a few years, but over the course of that, it has seen quite a big upheaval in the UK. So with like the Athletic launching and Amazon Prime having more games and things like that. So how have you noticed sort of football journalism changing over the course of the last sort of 5 years? You've been working as a commentator, and what sort of knock-on effects do you think this might have for student journalists?
I think it's such a difficult time it's going to be a difficult time for student journalists, if I'm honest, because a lot of them are going to be in the position I'm in the sense that, freelancing might just have to be their option starting out, because it's so like, it's impossible that you hear of a full-time contract in sports journalism if you haven't built up like a repertoire of God knows how many years. So because I know Katie White did a kickoff scheme with me, and she's at Athletic now, and she does women's football there. And so that kind of was her niche from the beginning, women's football. And she kind of covered that for a lot of years, and she worked at the women's sports desk in the Telegraph, and then she went on to do the Athletic gig. So it is kind of like, it's like once you find that niche, if you do find a niche, you will definitely kind of get noticed. But with the way kind of sports journalism is going, it is really difficult in the sense that I think the Athletic made an interesting move towards long-form journalism, because I can remember when I was at university, somebody came in from the media and went, yeah, long-form journalism is dead. People want quick, snappy, kind of bite-sized news. And I was always like, really? But, like you said, a lot of student journalists do long-form journalism well. And so, like I said, if it's something you do well and you enjoy, stick with it, because stuff like the Athletic, things like the Athletic will come along and it would be a good fit for you. The way sports journalism goes, it is really difficult. And I would say, like, freelancing is a good way in, but it isn't a financially secure way to kind of start your career. Definitely. So if you could I would say, if you're going into this industry and you get a job and it's not your dream job, take it, because especially if it's somewhere like the BBC or kind of a big organization like that, it's one of those things where you work your way up. So you get to know so-and-so on the desk and you go, I'm interested in this, I can do this, and you work your way up. That would be ideally the way. But with the way the pandemic works, it's so hard to do that when you're not in the office, because in the office environment and in the kind of media environment, it's nice to be able to do that because you get to know so-and-so on this desk and this desk. But it's so difficult to do that online because you kind of get your Zoom meetings with whoever you work for or whatever, or whoever, you've pitched to, and that's kind of about it. But I will also say this is a great time to reach out to people who are already in the industry, like reach out to kind of, I think just reach out, because I think people can be afraid to do that. I think when I was a student, I was brave that in the way I'm not now. I would just kind of find an email address and I would kind of just send an email address going, can you help me with this? Can you give me any advice? Because that could lead them to giving you the email address of another person. It works in weird ways like that in sports journalism in general. You can find channels like that. And just, get some advice. Do your own thing. If you feel like you can start a magazine, doesn't matter how long it is, and you can put that together, even if it's an online magazine, and you feel like you've got a group of friends and you can do that, do it, because you will probably get noticed for it. And if you do some good stuff, you will get noticed for it and you will gain traction. So just go for it, do it, ask people for advice. But I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And a lot of people can sugarcoat things in this industry and go, oh yeah, there's space for everyone, but it is so difficult, like, to stick with it, honestly, because God knows how many times I thought, damn, should I just do something else and do news journalism or something? Because sports journalism is it's like so overcrowded, and it is so difficult to kind of move up the ladder that quickly. So it's tough.
And final question from James in the chat. What advice would you give to go about getting work experience, and who do you contact, especially when you don't know any sort of editors already? Do you have any sort of like quick tips?
Yeah, so when I was doing work experience, I just found the general email address for these places. I can remember when I did work experience at Copper90, I just found that I think they had I think I looked on their website and they had like a couple of email addresses for different things, and I just kind of sent an email with a cover letter. But with work experience, just honestly, don't be afraid to send that cover letter and send that email, because even if you don't hear back from one or two, you will hear back from someone else who goes, okay, maybe not right now, but maybe if you can contact us in like a month or two's time, we can see if there's a space where you can come in. Because most of the time with work experiences, people are not being mean, it's just they don't have the time. Because with work experience, it's kind of like, in a way, you're kind of being babysat for a bit. You're having people, the thing is, they don't want it to be a horrible experience for you too, so they want to give you the knowledge and have kind of a one-to-one conversation with someone from this desk who's doing graphics, etc. That was my experience at Copper90. So send up those email addresses 110%. Like, don't be afraid to do that. Please do that. And don't be afraid of no responses. Like, follow up within a week and go, hey, I messaged about this. I don't know if you caught it or not, but I'm really eager to get into this industry. And it would be, I think, just go for it. Honestly, just go for it. Find it. Everyone has an email address on their website. Doesn't matter if it's info or contact or whatever, just send it off. Somebody who works there will get it. So just send that email address, man. Do it.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks so much to Renuka for coming. That was a great session, and obviously great to have a sports session at Spank, something a bit different. Coming up next, we've got 2 more sessions in room 1. We're hearing from Mariana Spring, who is the BBC's specialist disinformation reporter, about tackling disinformation in the media. And in room 2, media law expert David Banks is coming along to do sort of a Q&A, everything you could possibly want to know about media law, which I'm sure is going to be a popular one with all of our student publications. So thank you so much to everyone for coming. It's been a great session, and Goodbye.
Great, thank you.